the best time to start is now. That's always the case with anything that you ever do. And not just the quality of the links, but then also like the traffic that's driven by the links.
Starting now is key. It's all about taking that first step and not waiting for that perfect moment. And then once you've made that move, it's not just about getting links, it's about getting quality and the right type of links.
If you're building backlinks at a higher pace and a better speed than your competitors, you might be able to beat them out a little bit quicker without fully surpassing them. Building quality, beneficial links is definitely going to help and start the growth process pretty much immediately.
Building backlinks faster than your competitor can definitely give you an edge, but it's not just about the speed and the quantity of backlinks that you get.
At the end of the day, the content itself is truly king.
In today's episode, we're joined by Kalina MacKay. Kalina oversees digital PR, copywriting, and design at Go Fish Digital. She is passionate about creating innovative content that creates buzz and drives results. She has produced and pitched campaigns that have been featured in the Washington Post, Forbes, Business Insider, Cosmopolitan, and many others. In today's episode, we're going to dive in and learn from Kalina's approach to link building and how it can positively affect your brand and SEO. Welcome to the show, Kalina.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited as well. I'm glad that we had Chris make the introduction. He jumped on and did a podcast with us. I will link to it here if anybody's interested in learning from Chris Long, where we talk about technical SEO. But I'm very excited to learn about you, learn about your skills. Chris had lots of good things to say about you. So before we dive into the skill part of things, let's learn about Kalina. So where are you from? Where'd you grow up? What did you want to be when you were little? And how'd you go from there to where you're at today?
Thanks. Yeah, Chris is great. Definitely check that out if you haven't heard it. But yeah, I'm Kalina. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, so just in the suburbs outside of Charlotte, in a small suburb called Indian Trail. Growing up in elementary school, I joined our school's journalism team, and that was really where I found my love for journalism. And I thought that was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I was pretty confident that I wanted to be a broadcast news anchor on TV. So when it came time for college, I was just applying to the best journalism schools that I could find. Landed at UNC Chapel Hill, go Heels. I'm a big Tar Heel fan, and went into their journalism school, hit the ground running, and very quickly learned that journalism was not everything that it was in elementary school and even middle school and high school. Is a lot different in the real world. I was taking this one class, audio journalism, and they had me writing these stories about like these really controversial, sad things that were going on in the Chapel Hill community. And I had to like go out on the field and like interview people, and the people were telling me how much they hated the things going on in the community. And I was like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. It was just a little bit depressing. And I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. So it was a pretty big change up, but within the journalism school, there's also the PR side and the ad side and the marketing side. So I was like, okay, well, I know I like journalism. I know I like storytelling, just don't like the negative side of storytelling. So what if I take that storytelling and apply it to brands and kind of focus more on the uplifting side of the things that I knew that I loved? So I pivoted over to the PR side of things and got my degree in strategic communications within the journalism school. And then was really just looking for any internships I could find in the field. And I actually interned here at Go Fish. I did a handful of internships, but Go Fish really resonated with me. The agency life was just one that I was really excited by. I love being able to work with a lot of different clients and a lot of different industries, and never get bored, never doing the same thing for too long. So I interned here while I was in school, and then after graduating, I just have never left. So I started on the digital PR side, actually pitching the campaigns. That was where I interned, and that's where I spent the first year of my career, doing all of the outreach to journalists and building links for our clients, and really learned in the ground the benefit of link building, and then have kind of grown from there. I've since taken over the entire digital PR team. So we've got our team split into like the production and the promotion side of the team. Learned all of the production side and then recently added on the copywriting and design portions of the content team. So now I oversee all of that as well. So it's been a fun journey. But yeah, definitely a lot of different changes and not exactly where I expected I'd end up.
Yeah, lots of growth along the way, it sounds like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So I've interviewed a handful of journalists, and it's funny because they all say the same thing. They're now on the digital marketing side of things, but what really like pushed them away from the journalism side was the negativity. It's like the only thing that gets clicks. It's the only thing that that gets read or shared or anything like that, and it was kind of depressing. So I'm not surprised that you followed that same path, but along those same lines, it's also cool that you were able to use those skills in a more positive way, right? And so good for you for making that transition and going away from the negative. I wish more people would do that. I wish that our natural the natural person didn't want to click on the negative because it's juicy and we got to like hear the gossip. I wish we'd focus more on the positive, but sounds like that's what you're doing now, is focusing more on the positive and helping those clients. So your job currently is PR slash link building for the clients at the agency, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's correct, and the negative side of it is definitely important. It's still important news that needs to get shared out there. It just wasn't for me, but we actually have, like, quite a few people that work for the digital PR team now that came from broadcast journalism or came from some form of journalism background because it's just such a easy, natural transition. You used to receive those pitches, so now you can really make those pitches effective. You know what's going to resonate with a journalist. So yeah, it's a pretty common career path. But yeah, now I oversee the digital PR side of things as well as copywriting and design. So pretty much all of our content strategy here at GoFish is under my realm. And yeah, love the digital PR side of things, which is what we equate to be link building in SEO
Yeah,
terms.
for sure. You seem to be one of the lucky ones that have found a good place to be for a long time, right? Like I know there's I think in the digital world, I think I read an article a couple years ago that said the average was 1 to 3 years in the current company before they would bounce and go somewhere else. And one of the main reasons is because the current company sort of capped or plateaued their growth because there was only like one person above them, and if they didn't leave, they couldn't go up. And so it sounds like GoFish is taking care of you well enough to get you from an intern to an actual VP position and lots of growth along the way, taking on more, learning more, and helping the company. So good for you and good for them. It sounds like a really great company.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about GoFish. It's been amazing. It's like anytime I'm ready for the next challenge, it's like already there waiting for me. So, yeah, it's definitely been fun to grow alongside the company too. We've had a lot of growth since I even started. So yeah, it's been really fun to witness and be a part of the growth.
Yeah, I didn't know a lot about the company before I interviewed Chris, but after talking with Chris, I get the same impression from you as I did from him. And in fact, just yesterday, I saw Chris post a position open for an SEO person, and so I've actually referred a handful of my friends to go because
Oh,
I
cool.
respect Chris, and it sounds like it's such a great company to work for that that was probably a good move to have them go and apply for that position. So what are you currently working on that excites you? So like when you wake up in the morning, you're like, man, I just can't wait to go and do this. What is that for you right now?
Yeah, lots of different things. We're working on some cool AI initiatives within our digital PR campaigns. We're building out a tool that is helping us with the ideation process of our digital PR campaigns, which is really exciting because ideation is one of those beasts that can be really time consuming. It's really fun, but it's also really time consuming, especially when you're in a creative rut. Which happens pretty frequently. So, we're building out an AI tool that collects the data that I've collected on all of our past digital PR campaigns, compiles them, and really helps optimize our campaigns and pulls out like what is the most successful beats that we should be pitching, what are the most successful formats that we've done, and then spits out a few ideas like specific to whatever client or whatever type of campaign that we're looking for. So that's an exciting one that we're working on. Um, yeah, I would say that's one of the big ones. We're also just working on some cool um, revised ways to think about our reporting process. Digital PR and link building is changing so fast that we're also changing our reporting process pretty fast, and looking at like not just the links that we're receiving and not just the quality of the links, but then also like the traffic that's driven by the links, and things like that. So that's another thing that we're really prioritizing right now is our different reporting strategies.
That's cool. I love that you're focusing on the data. I think a lot of times in the past, people have focused on just the number of links or maybe the domain authority or whatever. But I know that it's been proven, at least recently within the last couple of years, that the links that get traffic are the ones that actually add the most value, and not necessarily for the traffic, but they add the value of ranking better for specific keywords. So you're not just getting more traffic from them, but you are getting better ranking. So I love that you're using the data to make sure your clients are getting the best of both worlds. So good for you for doing that. The AI piece, is that, did you say you're building that, or you're experimenting, or is it like a GPT, or is it's like, walk me through what that is?
Yeah, we're building a custom tool using a GPT that's an internal tool right now that we're fully building in-house. And it basically pulls on all of our data, and you input like what topic you want to brainstorm around, and then what campaign format do you want the campaign to be. And then it's goes in and reads like all of the data and is like, okay, these are the topics that kind of align with what it's looking for. These are the ones that were successful. These are the ones that weren't. And then also takes into account like what's going on in the news and in the world right now, and then spits out different ideas that kind of align with that. So yeah, it's an internal tool right now, but and still in our beta phase, but it's an exciting one that I'm excited to see where it evolves and where it goes from here.
Yeah, that would be cool if you could productize it and turn it into something that other companies or agencies could use. I mean, I can see value in it from my agency standpoint. So let me know when that comes out. I'll buy it. That's great.
Yeah, totally.
If it ever does come out as a product, I would love to know about that. So let me know. Okay, so let's dive into my favorite part of the podcast, where we talk about the tactical and strategic ways to do whatever topic we're talking about. So in this case, we're talking about PR and link building. So for business owners who are like just starting in SEO, what's like the simplest way to explain the importance of link building?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think you have to kind of pull things back and go back to the original goals of SEO. So if you have two pieces of content from two different websites that are pretty similar in terms of like the actual quality of content and everything that's on that specific page, Google is going to favor the site with a little bit more authority. And the way that it views authority is through things like backlinks. There's a lot that goes into the rankings, obviously, but backlinks are a big piece of that. So in Google's eyes, backlinks act as a vote of confidence, kind of like that nod of trust. So a site like Business Insider or Forbes or New York Times has a well-established, built-up reputation and authority, and Google knows that, and Google accepts that. So if a site like that trusts X client enough to link to that website, Google says, okay, I can probably also trust that client. It kind of passes down that vote of trust, that nod of confidence, because if a site like Business Insider already has this strong reputation, strong authority, they're not going to mislead their audience
Right.
into like some sketchy, spammy website. So it kind of has that trickle down effect, and you kind of have to think about the long term play of link building. It's not like getting links is immediately going to transition into higher revenue and just better business growth. It's really a long term play. It's going to benefit your overall SEO strategy. And at the end of the day, with more links, more visibility, more authority, it's going to increase your domain authority and then overall ranking. So it's going to help with those specific pages that are your keywords that you're trying to rank for, um, on a long term kind of like tangential path, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think where a lot of people, I think there's a lot of areas people can make mistakes when doing link building. I think the biggest one is that, so say I have a company, I go to an agency, the agency will automatically like just start throwing links at it, right? We can talk about the quality, we can talk about anchor text, we can talk about all that, but if you're a brand new website and you've never got links, Google looks at this graph of like 000 and then like a spike of a bunch of links, and then like no more, and then a spike and a spike, and Google wants it to look natural, like get some, don't get some, get some, don't get some. And then as your website and your company grows, you're going to get more and more and more each day or each month. And so there has to be that natural trend when getting the links. So talking through that, if I'm a company that is just starting my link building, what is the process of like analyzing my current link building to see, is it good, is it quality, is it X, Y, and Z, all of the above we just talked about? and where should I start to build on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the best time to start is now. That's always the case with anything that you ever do. But you can always look into like your backlinks and then also your competitors that might be beating you in the search for your primary keywords that you're trying to rank for. What sites do they have backlinks from that you don't have? And what does that discrepancy look like? I will say other things that Google prioritizes is like the speed at which you're building backlinks. So sometimes it can be really discouraging to look at competitors and see that they have like thousands, if not hundreds
Yeah.
of thousands more referring domains than you. So sometimes it's like better to just not look at that and just kind of focus on your own site and focus on building quality backlinks. Because if you're building backlinks at a higher pace and a better speed than your competitors, you might be able to beat them out a little bit quicker without fully surpassing them. So I think that it's definitely helpful to understand the landscape and is exceedingly helpful to look at what types of sites that they're getting links from and how can you build your strategy around that and how can you achieve those specific backlinks. But it's also helpful to just hit the ground running and start building backlinks that make sense for your site, quality, relevancy from day one.
Do you recommend they look and see what they currently have, and if they have bad stuff, go and disavow it, or do you just start fresh and move forward?
We typically will just start with a brand new fresh campaign. You can definitely go in and disavow links, though building quality beneficial links is definitely going to help and start the growth process pretty much immediately. So that's what we focus on more is like focusing on growth rather than going back through and like weeding out the negative stuff.
There's lots of different processes to get links. So like you can do like you were talking about, you can go look at your competitors and say, what do they have that I don't have? You can reach out to those, websites and say, hey, I'd also like a link. Here's some value. You can monitor the links that you've had in the past and see which ones have dropped off and go reach back out and say, hey, can I get those again? You can reach out to bloggers or influencers and say, here's my product. Will you write about me and get a link? You can, build relationships with, the newspaper articles and reporters and stuff like that and try to get links that way. What's your preferred method? And have you noticed that one over the other is moves the needle faster?
I would say our bread and butter is digital PR, which is really prioritizing content up front and thinking about it in a way that's mutually beneficial to the journalist. So at GoFish, we prioritize all of our link building on like media, publications, journalists, because one, that's like typically going to be high quality websites that we're getting links from. And two, there's so many different media publications that we can pull from in terms of like matching up relevancy with our clients. And also a site like New York Times or Washington Post is going to be relevant to almost every website. So that would be a win for almost every client. So that's why we prioritize the media journalism side of things. From the digital PR perspective, we always do fresh campaigns with a focus on content. And within that content, we're not just writing a story that we're going to pitch to a journalist. We're actually doing a level of like data analysis, a survey. Sometimes we do like interactive campaigns. So we'll create like an interactive calculator or something to that effect and really create something that a journalist is going to be excited to cover. This has been the best strategy that we've found to secure those high quality backlinks without necessarily having like an established reputation of whatever the client is. Like the client could be pretty much anybody. If your piece of content is good, it's going to get pick up and get coverage. At the same point, you don't necessarily have to have those journalistic relationships that are so coveted in the PR world. If your piece of content is good, it'll really speak for itself. So that's the best way we've seen to start from the ground up is really prioritizing content and prioritizing unique, interesting content with a data component or with something that like is going to add value to a journalist that a journalist is looking for to add to their stories, to write a brand new, fresh story about, and not just like a specific product or service that the client might be promoting at the time, because that's less valuable to a journalist. They get dozens of pitches every day from all of the different products and services. But if they can get something that's like data driven, that's going to add to their story and like really be something to share with their readers, I think that's where we see the most benefit and the most success.
That's an interesting approach. I want you to dig down a little bit deeper into that. So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is if I'm a chiropractor, I should, and you can use AI to do this, but build some kind of calculator or tool or something that adds value to your clients and put it on your website, get that value, then get that data, and then reach out to a journalist and say, hey, here's what we've done. Nobody else in the industry has done this. Come check this out and write an article about us. Is that kind of the approach?
Yeah, pretty much. We frame it as something that we like to call tangential content,
Okay.
which is we pitch it to clients as like content that's related to, but not necessarily about your brand or service. Instead, we're like really focusing on the data, the research, the creative component of it. So it might not necessarily even relate to your specific clients. It'll probably be relevant. It makes sense to like live on your website, but instead it's going to be like a piece of research. So for instance, we did for like an SMS marketing company, we created a calculator where people could input their salary and then select a CEO, a tech CEO, and then it'll pop out like how fast that Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, can make your salary in zero point 0.2
Hmm.
seconds. And we tied that back to SMS marketing through talking about like the tech world and these tech giants that are really taking over. And we also pitched this in the time of the Zuckerberg trials. So it was like really timely, really relevant, and we got a ton of media pickups from that. So it's kind of reframing the thought away from products and services, but instead to the consumers and what is a journalist going to want to write about and what are a journalist's audience going to want to read and be excited about.
Yeah, that's cool. I think in most cases, your approach is it's a safe approach when it comes to like Google guidelines. If you take different approaches, or whoever is listening does, what advice do you have for them to build a strategy that stays within the Google guidelines so that you really don't get punished on the next algorithm update?
Yeah, it's definitely risky to do things like buying links. That was pretty much all of the link building industry a few years, several years ago at this point. But I think it's really important to focus on quality over quantity. With a strategy like digital PR, it can be a lot more hit or miss. It can be a lot more unpredictable because you're really relying on the news cycle. And it's truly an earned media strategy. So you can't go out to these link farms and just say, like, hey, here's my budget, get me links. It's just hoping and praying that a journalist is going to like your content enough to link to it. So I think reframing the goals into a place where you want to prioritize quality over quantity is really important. And also just focusing on the ideation, putting emphasis on the content that you're putting out there is really helpful to get the kind of results that you want to see. You don't have to be like the most authoritative, but if your piece of content is good and successful and you've put a lot of thought into it, it's going to naturally build links over time. So you can't like cheat on the content part of it up front. That's a really important piece that a lot of people, I think, jump to the end and just try to start getting the links right away. And then they miss out on like all of the high quality links because you didn't put time into like the strategy and the content strategy and the actual topic that you're pitching them. So I think focusing really heavily on the upfront and then reframing to like less quality links is sometimes better than more quantity links.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I was going to bring that up, that like if you got one link from a really quality, authoritative website versus 50 links from average or low quality websites, you're going to be better off with the one link. So it's not always about like what a lot of agencies do is they say we'll get you X amount of links per month, and like that doesn't account for quality. It doesn't account for, any of the other factors that we've talked about. So I think you're spot on. Really focusing on what's important and getting the best one with the best content is going to have, um, the best long term success without being trapped in one of the Google algorithm updates and being penalized for that. So if I'm a business
Yeah.
owner out there listening right here, and I'm like, okay, this all sounds great, but like how do I do this? So if I maybe I don't, you already mentioned one way. So build a calculator, build something that is fun, that is different than other people have, and get noticed there. But do you have ways where, or do you have advice on how a business owner could create an effective pitch when reaching out to these websites or these journalists? Is there like a strategy that you have in place?
Yeah, for sure. We have like a recipe for a pitch that we've seen the most success with. We do a lot of data tracking on our pitches as well. It's important to think when you're thinking about a pitch, there's three things to think about. First, who you're pitching. That's a really key piece because if you have the best pitch in the world, but you're hitting the wrong inbox, it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to read it. So you have to really think about targeting who is the right person to reach out to for that pitch. And that's not just going into Cision or going into Muck Rack and finding somebody in your relevant beat. It's really understanding what they write about, reading into their articles, understanding not just like the topics that they write about, but the way they write about them. And do they typically link back to websites? Do they include data sources? Is it more opinion pieces? Because opinion pieces are really just their opinion. They're probably not going to give you a backlink. But really understanding like the types of content that the journalist is writing. So that's the first piece, is having a good strategy of who you're reaching out to. The second piece of a good pitch is a good subject line. You can have the best pitch in the world in your body pitch, but if you don't have a good subject line, it's not going to get opened. So we've seen the best success with things that are either like statistics. So like 40% of people would rather give up their smartphone over their dog, or their dog over their smartphone was one that I pitched recently. Something that's like really eye-catching, buzzy, and gonna get the journalist excited to open the email and like, hey, I want to know more about that. Or things that are like a question. So framing like, would you rather give up your dog or your smartphone? New survey finds out. Just something to like pique their interest and really stand out in their inbox. Um, and then you can also always go with like, this new study shows XYZ, just something more straightforward. When you get into the actual pitch itself, we've found that straightforward, short, sweet pitches are the most effective. Journalists decide whether they're going to cover a story or decide whether they're going to keep reading a story in about like a few seconds. So that's how much time you have to capture their interest. You don't want to waste that time on like the fluff and the like, hi, how are you? This is what I do. This is what my client does. You want to get right into the meat of what the story is that you're pitching. So an interesting hook is great to start with, and then right away get into the data, get into the insights. If you have a cool graphic to share, that's great to include in your pitch. And then providing yourself as a resource. So saying like, happy to talk about this more on a call if that would be helpful to you, or happy to share the full data set with you if that's helpful, or something like that to give them some extra piece. And then signing it off. It doesn't have to be like a long pitch. Like I said, you only have a few seconds of their attention. So you really want to think about every word that goes into your pitch needs to add some sort of value and not just like to take up space.
So when you're doing this, you do the title that's very captivating. So now they've clicked in, and you have few bullet points of data. Do you say, hey, I think this would be cool for you to write about? Do you say, I want a link from you? Do you say, we've written a blog post, or we've had this that you could mention? Like, what is that question that you ask the journalist?
Yeah. So typically we'll create a landing page for our clients, and it's like everything all there on that landing page. It starts with like, this is the study, and then goes into like the statistics, and then it wraps up with a methodology. So everything that they would hypothetically need to write about should all of their questions should be answered in that landing page if they have further questions. Of course, we're always happy to like field the questions, but they shouldn't have to like go looking and go digging like, oh, when was this data collected? Oh, what survey platform did they use? How many people did they survey? Like all of that should be in one place, whether that's on a landing page, in a landing page, or like in a PDF package. Either is fine. We have found that landing pages is the most successful because then a client's more likely to link back to it. And then you don't really have to ask for a link because they're just going to cite their sources. That's like pretty much best practices in journalism. So it doesn't necessarily require that like awkward question of like, hey, can you give me a link? It's just like, hey, do you want to cover this? Or I thought this might be an interesting piece for your readers. Let me know how I can share more. But typically, if you have it in a landing page, they're going to link like 80 to 90% of the time. We do get those unlinked mentions, the dreaded unlinked mentions from time to time. And then we'll follow up with them if that's the case and say, like, hey, we'd really like for you to cite your sources. It'll provide your readers more context over the study and give them more details. But for the most part, they do naturally link back to the landing pages if you have it all in one place.
Is it better coming from a third party talking about it versus themselves? So like if I'm a chiropractor and I have this landing page that's beautiful, and I answers all the questions you're talking about, and I reach out to this journalist and say, hey, look what I did, check this out, versus someone like you saying, hey, we have this client, or we found this awesome website that thought you might be interested in covering. Does it matter, like, if it I guess what I'm trying to ask is, does it come off less or more humble if it comes from a third party versus like yourself?
I don't think it matters. I honestly think it adds a little bit of authority if it does come from, like, the chiropractor themselves. But at the same plate, I think if it comes from, like, an agency or a PR professional, that person might have an established relationship with a journalist, and journalists are very used to working with agencies. They get agency pitches all the time. So I don't really think that it phases journalists one way or the other. I think it could add some credibility on either side for different reasons. But at the end of the day, the content itself is truly king.
So you brought up one thing I was going to ask about anyway, is a relationship. So I have two questions on this. One is, if I'm the chiropractor and I want to do this on my own, is there a tool or a place where I can reach out to, where I can go and say, give me all of the journalists in my local area? So one, that's the first question. So do I have access? Second,
Mhm.
should I try to build relationships with them? And what does that look like? Is it just reaching out on LinkedIn? Is it just saying hi every once in a while? Like, how do I add value to them and build that relationship so that when we actually have a campaign, we've already established that?
Yeah, the for the first part, sourcing contacts, there's definitely a ton of tools. There's like Cision and Muckrack. They're pretty expensive, and come with that fee. So if that's not something that somebody's interested in, there's definitely other options. You can always do it takes a lot of time, but you can always do some manual research into like your local station. So you can into the Google News tab and search chiropractor and read through the stories that people are writing about chiropractors or about whatever topic that you're trying to pitch, and then go into those stories, look at the journalist that wrote the story, look at the rest of their stories, and then try to find their email. A lot of times the emails will be listed on like a broadcast news station's about me or contact us page. Or a lot of times a helpful trick is like they'll have a pattern that all of their emails follow. So if you find one email and it's like first name dot last name at website.com, you can typically replicate that for pretty much any journalist. And that's usually successful. Sometimes you'll get a bounce, but there's no harm in trying. So there's different approaches if you don't want to pay for the tools. And honestly, the tools are really helpful for finding a lot of contacts in bulk, but sometimes the manual contacts are the ones that you'll see the best success with because they're not in the tools. So they're not getting thousands of pitches from thousands of PR people every single day. So sometimes it's beneficial to supplement your strategy regardless. You don't really have to have the tools. It's not like a end all be all for pitching contacts, in my opinion. The second question on relationship building, I think it's a common misconception that you like have to have an established relationship in order to secure coverage from sites. At the end of the day, if you have good content, they're gonna defer to that. They're looking for things to write about, so it's just a matter of breaking through in their inbox. I definitely think journalists favor people that they've worked with in the past. If they have established relationships, that they're like they see a pitch from Kalina and they've worked with me several times, they might be more likely to open it. Like that's definitely true, but I don't think that that means that it's impossible to get coverage without having a pre-established relationship. I've found that journalists are like, they don't often respond to emails. They're very busy and they get a ton of pitches. So, relationship building can be really hard. And I found the most success in relationship building through actually like working on projects and providing them resources. And they're like, they cover one thing and they're like, hey, this was really great. I'd love to work with you again. Please put me on your list. Send me the next thing you're working on. So, I've found that relationship building kind of happens throughout the process and then it gets easier over time. But just diving in headfirst and starting and focusing on good content and providing them something that's going to be valuable to their audience and not just valuable to you is probably the best way to start with relationship building.
That's great advice. What are some common mistakes you see people make when starting their link building journey, or building relationships? All the stuff we've been talking about. What are some common mistakes people make where you'd be like, for sure, don't do these three things?
Yeah. Um, I would say a big one is paid links, which we kind of already touched on, but paid links is like the easy out. And it's definitely something that you can see quick numbers from. You can quickly get some links through paying for them, but long term, it's not going to be beneficial to your site in the way that these high quality links would be. If you're going the digital PR approach, the biggest mistake or misconception that I see is leading with your brand, your products, your services, which we touched on this a little bit previously as well. But a lot of times people think that their brands and products and services are the most thing in the world. And they probably are. But a journalist might not want to write about that because a journalist can get paid a lot of money for writing like advertorials and sponsored articles and things like that. So they know not to click on things that are going to come off as overly promotional and just trying to like get a feature in Forbes. We've interviewed journalists in like informational interviews, and we've heard verbatim that feedback of like, I get pitches all the time of people that just want to get a link from Forbes, and I'm not going to cover them because I need to think about me and what is going to resonate with my audience. You really have to like reframe your thought process to focus on things that are going to provide value to the journalist. So things that might complement stories that they're already working on, things that take a lot of time, like a data pull, like scraping through the census, pulling out some key nuggets, putting that into a cool graphic so then they can quickly take that and incorporate that into their story. They don't have to do the data analysis piece of it. You've already done it for them. So think about things that are like connected to your products and services, but not putting your products and services first. That's like the biggest red flag, I think, for a journalist. And the biggest thing that's going to get your email deleted and then just not give you a lot of progress in link building. So reframing to be like resource driven and prioritizing the mutually beneficial side of relationships.
What do you think? What else have we missed? What questions haven't I asked that you would give advice to these business owners around link building?
I think with link building, it being an earned media strategy, there's a lot of ups and downs. Even with something like digital PR, which is prioritizing quality content, especially with that, you're going to have some unsuccessful campaigns, and that's okay. I think not getting discouraged if you have a piece of content that you felt really confident in and you were like, this is going to be the best link builder ever. And then it doesn't get any interest from a journalist. That has happened to me more times than I can count. I feel really confident in something up front and then it doesn't work. So just keep going is like my biggest piece of advice. With the news cycle, you're gonna find something that hits eventually. You're gonna find an audience and gonna find a place for it. You just have to keep going. Persistency is like truly key with digital PR, both within campaigns in terms of like if you feel like you pitched everybody, you probably haven't. There's probably more people you can pitch. And then also creating new content and continuing with digital PR. Even if the first campaign isn't as successful as you hoped, try again with a new content topic, try again with a new format. So I'd say that's like my biggest piece of advice is just don't give up on it. And if you're not seeing immediate results, that's okay. Keep persisting with link building and eventually you'll start to see like the needle turn and the impact long term.
Yeah, and I'd also add to that like everything you're describing takes time and it takes effort to do it right. But if you look at like the top 5 signals Google looks at to rank your website, it's link building. And link building is definitely in the top 5, maybe the top 3. It has been top 1 for a long time in the past. So I would say take the time to do it right, right? Make sure it's done just the way you're saying. Where do you see the future going in link building and how do you see it evolving over time?
Yeah, it's changed so much in just the short amount of time that I've been in the field, and I'm sure that it'll continue to change. It's interesting because there's always this conversation around like, oh, links matter so much, and then the next day they don't matter at all, and then they matter so much again. So I personally don't see links going away in any capacity. I think that they'll always be an important ranking factor because it's an easy way to determine authority and kind of establish reputation. I think that there will be more of an emphasis on traffic, which we talked about earlier, and then also relevancy. In the past, it was just number of links, and then it shifted into like domain authority of those links and prioritizing quality links. And now I'm seeing it more turn into like the relevancy of like those links. Does it make sense? Does it match up with the specific website where you're getting the link from? And then the second piece of it is the traffic. Are they getting the clicks? Is it getting the engagement? So I think it's just getting harder and harder, which means the content has to get better and better, and you have to really refine your strategy. But at the end of the day, I don't see links going anywhere. I think that they'll always be important. It's just a matter of getting the right links and really focusing in on the perfect strategy that's tailored to the specific site.
Kehlani, I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on with us today and teach us about link building and PR. I think, I mean, you've obviously got a lot of experience, a lot of years under your belt. And when you talk about it, it makes it sound so easy. I know it's probably a lot harder for just, the average Joe to get out there and create some quality links in the way that you're describing. So, I mean, I would recommend to business owners, like a lot of the stuff we talk about on the podcast, is stuff you can do on your own. You can go and update your title and meta tag on your own. You can do internal linking on your own. But some of these harder things that add a ton of value, that also add a little bit of risk, I would recommend, and you probably would too, reaching out to an agency or somebody who has done it in the past and has that proven track record. So I appreciate you taking the time and enlightening us, and joining the podcast today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it definitely is very resource intensive. We have like 4 different people that touch every campaign at minimum. So it's like not just one person doing the whole thing. That would be incredibly exhausting. But yeah, it takes a lot of work and definitely a labor of love.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for your time, and to everyone else who's listening out there. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks.